Hey Addicts, welcome back to another review. I'm Josh, and today we're talking about Netflix's newest show, The Umbrella Academy. Now, for those that don't know, this is based off of a comic book by Dark Horse in the early 2000s, I believe. I've dabbled a little bit into the source material a while ago, and with that being said, I was a little bit cautious going into this show, but I was pleasantly surprised, so we're here to talk about it. So to give you guys a kind of an idea of what the story is. I'm not going to go into spoilers or anything, but you're first introduced to the story in like the 80s. There's this event that happens where there's 40 some children born across the entire world at the same time on the same day, and they all have extraordinary abilities. And it follows this eccentric billionaire that adopts 7 of these children to make kind of this protective team of heroes. And the story actually takes place 17 years after the disappearance of one of the children. And when he comes back, he lets the others know that there is a end of the world level event and they need to stop the apocalypse however they can. So that's basically the main plot of this first season. We're going to go over some positives and negatives, try to keep this short as we can. So one thing right off the bat that I will say is the acting. The acting is pretty solid in this. I wouldn't say we have A-listers in this series, but they are definitely capable people, and I think they bring to life the characters that they play really well, and I really enjoyed watching all of them. Another thing that I would list as a positive is a proper use of their budget. Netflix, I feel like, gives pretty good budgets to shows. This one, I would say, is not on the level of one of the other shows that we have talked about or covered, like The Kingdom, but it definitely does, make proper use of what they were given. For instance, there's one character that's completely CGI, and I think they use him just enough that, we're able to get him when we absolutely need him in story beats, but they don't use him so much that it takes away from letting them, use their budget in, bigger scale fights. Moving on, one thing that is a minor thing, but I did want to highlight it just because of how unexpected it was, and that is the use of music in this. Their soundtrack is actually pretty good. There's some weird instances that they use certain songs, but I did dig it. One thing I guess I forgot to mention is this show is very bizarre, and the best way I can describe it is listing kind of another show to kind of compare it to, and that is Legion, except I would say it's less trippy and more just weird, but it definitely has a certain flair that adds to its character, and I think that's something that, yes, it is odd at times to watch, and maybe in certain instances it doesn't land as perfectly as some other parts, but I think it does a good job of kind of making this show stand out in a midst of, an overpopulation of superhero stories. So going on to, continuing our list of positive things, there is some interesting characters in this, and I think, for the most part at least, they have some good setup and some good payoff. The adaptation of this and of the source material, I would say, is probably the biggest highlight of the whole show. For me, I haven't read all of the source material, but I have read a good amount of it. And I would say I like the adaptation more than I do the source material. I think they flesh out a lot of things. I think they go back and make things flow more organically, and just overall, I think it lands a lot better than what it did in the book. And to go along with the plot, the length of this show, I think, really helps with how the plot really lands. We get 10 episodes, and the length, I think, is just perfect. They're 46-minute episodes roughly, and we may have like 1 hour episodes twice in there, and I think it was just the perfect sweet spot for the story, just because of how low those land. And one of the reasons why it does is because of how well they divide the spotlight between the characters. There is 7 main protagonists. I'm not going to get into all of them, but they do a good job of highlighting each one, but they do it in a way that's not blocked off by, you know, one episode. Maybe a little bit in terms of like maybe one has the main spotlight in an episode, but we still see the others. But overall, I think they did a good job. One example real quick that I'll just list off here is the Academy member number 7. I'm just going to use their numbers to make it easier. Number 7 is one that I think I found the most intriguing out of the members as a whole. Her storyline, at least, I think is interesting. Not to say that, you know, we haven't seen it before, but I just like how they build her up and get you to it, you know, feel a certain attachment to her. I could say the same thing about number 5. I think he has a very charismatic way of interacting with the characters and also propelling the story forward. So I would say he probably steals the spotlight the most. And, you know, kind of segueing into downsides, you know, specifically talking about certain characters, number 4 is my least favorite character. They do some changes from the book. I don't really care that much, you know, in terms of these minute changes. But there was just something about like his dialogue, the way he interacts. I just found him more annoying than, you know, funny, and I guess that's kind of what they were going for. And I just didn't land for me personally. But I do think he has a great dynamic with one of the other characters, a character that has history with a lot of the main cast. And that's probably one of the best uses of him. And even though he was my least favorite character, he does progress in a way that I do kind of like him towards the end. So, you know, one of the negatives, kind of a positive, but still I think they could, you know, maybe change that. Probably will be better if they decide to do a next season or when they come back. Now, getting into probably like the main negatives, there is... well, real quick, sorry, but there is one side character. I'm talking a lot about characters, I know, but stay with me here. There is one side character that is important for motivation of one of the main Academy members, but I do feel like the direction they put them in is something that was kind of a missed opportunity because the actor they had was so charismatic and they were really good. And this is kind of more of a personal thing. I was just sad to see them go. But, you know, it happens and it was kind of needed, but I just wish they would have maybe taken a little bit longer to do that, or at least given them more of a highlight before they decided to go the route they did. Probably the biggest negative, and probably one that will have the most talk out of people, is there's 2 twists that are associated with the main storyline. And these are something that are really easy to spot. I feel like, you know, the first couple minutes you're introduced to them or you kind of learn more about them, you're easily like, oh yeah, I know what's going to happen with this character in the end game, you know? And, you know, this would be something that I would tolerate or I would be understanding, you know, if it was something fresh, something that we haven't seen before. But I will say out of these 2 characters, they did have, you know, very superhero trope storylines. You know, we've just seen them 1,000 times. And, you know, I think what saves it and what makes it still enjoyable is the charisma of the actors and actress themselves, but also just how well of a good job that they get you to, you know, feel connected with these characters. So that would probably be the biggest gripe. The side plot, I would say, had me gripped way more in the duration of the first season, just because there's a level of mystery there that I think is not only intriguing, but it's you know, I wouldn't say harder to figure out, but just a little bit more behind the shadows, where you don't know exactly what direction they're going to take it, or you don't get the full story, is basically what I'm saying. So with that being said, I really enjoyed this show. It kind of, you know, broke my expectations. I didn't really have them set that high, but I actually ended up liking this more than I thought I would. So for that, for me, I would say it's a worth it. You know, you should go check it out. Definitely say that, you know, this show, I think it's a certain small demographic of audience that probably people will really love it. So that's why I would say, you know, you should definitely go check it out to see if it's, you know, your kind of show, because I'm sure with a show like this, it's really going to need the support for it to continue on. But that's all I got to say, Addicts. I really appreciate hearing all your hearback. What did you guys think of the show? Have you already seen it? Did you like the ending? Where do you think it's going to go? They've pulled up some mix-ups from the books, so I might even go back and dabble into this into the comics a little bit. And if that's something, I know we do comics on this channel. If you guys want me to go back and review that, let me know too. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you, and I will be back to see the second season, and we're going to talk about it too. But until next time, Max, we'll just see you later. Peace.